We're good?
You're good.
We're good to go. Call the order at 8:34. Adoption of the agendas. Everybody had a chance to look through it. I hope. Yeah. Motion for adoption. Council Murphy. All in favor? Carried. Delegations. Are you a delegation, Michelle? No. I don't know what
I'm
hat
down
you-
under number 6.
I don't know what hat you might be wearing, so that's why I thought I'd better ask.
Multitasking lady.
Just my work hat
You're
today.
as bad as I am at times, so. Public presentations. No, moving right on. Holy cow, this is my record. Mr. Neal, would you like to?
Sure, yeah. Just a few things. So the signage project is moving forward. Having had multiple meetings, with high signs and 818 and Youngstown and Mark, and there's quite a crew of us when we get on our virtual meetings. We've been doing that weekly. They were out last week to do some locate all of the sign locations and tweak them in terms of whether they need to go this direction or this direction, if there's anything in the way in terms of utilities and stuff. They have come across a couple of the issues, I think primarily in the downtown area where they wanted to put some signs in, wayfinding signs. So they're gonna present a couple of different options to us. They just felt the signs were too big when they were gonna block a significant part of the sidewalk, so nobody wants that. So we're gonna take a look at that. Right now, they basically have their engineers looking at the size of the screw piles required so that they can determine what size they need to be for each sign. First calls have been completed. They do hope to have their screw piles in the ground or have started by the end of October. So they'll get the screw piles in the ground, get them there. The signs won't be ready till later. And then as the signs are ready, they'll come out and install the signs on the screw piles. So it's going along. It's going on good. I'm sure there's going to be some hiccups knowing with the number of signs in a number of locations, but so far we're moving forward. Delia Ice is progressing.
Just one thing on the
Yeah.
signers, Kim. So is there like a warranty period or anything like that in our?
Yeah, I think, I can't remember if this one was, the minimum was 1 year, somewhere between 1 and 3, so.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no, that's good. Good question. So Irina, as far as I know, I haven't talked to Kevin since Monday, but Delia's ice was going in. Edwin was over helping him the first few days. So they should be ready. As far as I know, they'll be ready for minor hockey on Saturday. And minor hockey will then play their schedule for October in Delia. And I think figure skating are probably starting the following week, like the 3rd, 4th, somewhere in there. So as far as I know, I haven't heard anything, and if I don't hear anything, that's usually good news that everything's going along according to plan.
So
So
Dan still has tentatively.
4 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't talked to him. I can't remember last time Kevin talked to him. The manufacturer was still saying it was going to be ready to ship in early October.
Okay.
So, the seniors amenity zone project, so you probably see some work going on there. They got all their tree protections in. Saturday, I went out with their foreman and we made some tweaks to the alignment on Palliser Trail. They've got it staked and ready to go. So I don't know. I know they've done some preliminary excavation. Maybe the mayor knows. I don't know if you talked, Mr. Mayor, to, has the foreman been
Yeah.
over Berg? Okay. Ken
Yeah.
Burgess, okay.
Yeah.
So,
He seems to be cool.
yeah,
Yeah.
I know I chatted with him yesterday. And it sounds like, I don't know if they've started their total excavation of the
They
concrete.
have started, they lifted some of the concrete in the park
Yeah,
and it's a sand bed. underneath
Yeah,
it.
that's
It's
what
not a gravel bed, so he was quite surprised that it hasn't broken up.
well, that concrete is, yeah,
It's in good shape.
yeah.
Yeah, so.
So, yeah, so that's again, one of the issues or one of the challenges. So we've got some contingency dollars, so they had expected to excavate, 9 or 10 inches of, and they're just still with loam, so they might have to put a geotextile, layer, on top of the loam and then the gravel to get their compaction. So I said, yeah, it could be lots of loam there, just looking at the land. So, but yeah, those sidewalks, we're scared to guess how many years the sidewalks have been in there, but they're in great shape. So.
No, and like he said, with having just a sand base underneath them, he said it's bizarre that they're in as good a shape as they are.
Yeah, so that's moving forward. They're hoping that they're gonna have the work completed. Perfect world, mid to third week in October, but they're moving forward. Just starting to put out some promotion on Gord Bamford. So anybody has any questions? The basic premise is we aren't selling tickets. So it's first come, first serve. Doors will open at 5:30 and we will allow up to 1,200 people in.
So are we doing tables or chairs or?
We haven't 100% decided.
Okay, no, I just, things that pop into my
Yeah,
head. So
no, yeah. So that's going forward, so the time frame basically would be opening the show at 7 and it would end around, I'm looking at Michelle, 11.
Yeah.
So Garrett will play for 45 minutes, then there'll be a break while they change everything over. Then Gord will play for approximately an hour and a half, and then there'll be a break and they'll change back over and Garrett will come back on for 45 minutes at the end. So it should be a good night. I've had a couple texts yesterday from people, no tickets? No. You just have to take a chance and show up when you think you can show up. So hopefully we get a good crowd out for it. Working on the coal transitions grant, hoping to get it in here this week and move forward. I'm pretty optimistic that we'll get significant funding through this program. And we can look at redoing our downtown core, both underground and above ground. That's the
that would make Mayor Polishchuk very happy.
that's the
Yes, I
plan.
bet it would. Yep.
That's the plan. But when I say downtown core, I'm saying that's 3 blocks. So,
Excuse me?
Yep.
So when is the deadline for the grant?
there is no deadline.
Okay.
It's kind of as you
Probably
get it
ask
in.
that.
They kind of set aside dollars in their budget for each respective community or region, I should say. So special areas has tapped into some of these dollars on this program to do the work they've done on their industrial park south of Sheerness. And they're gonna tap into a few more to look at water, having water on site, so.
So a federal grant, so this election with UCP will have no impact on it.
Right, yeah. And they have this set aside in their budget and it is federal, so. Community center, we are gonna resubmit that grant. MP did some more work on what they call the RET screen. Did it a little more in depth and got some, I think some better information that will show some better energy savings on our renovation, which will help the score of the project, so. Chamber event, Mr. Mayor, you probably have a ticket, I would assume, as a chamber member or on the board.
On the board, yes.
So if anybody wishes to attend, let me know. In the past, town has bought tickets for counselors who wish to attend that evening. So it will be Thursday the 20th at the community center. It sounds like, I don't know, Mr. Mayor probably has more info, but it looks like they got lots of nominees.
Lots of nominations. It's been phenomenal. Yeah, the amount of it and quality that, like, some of them in the past, from what I gathered, were very marginal. Like, I'd like to nominate Kim for Community Service Award, and that's what it would say.
Yeah.
And now some of them are like almost like a page and a half kind of thing of documentation and support. And
Yeah, so, and that bodes well. The more nominees you have, the more people you have in attendance too.
Yeah.
So, so if anybody wants to know or let me know. And we get two complimentary tickets. We're a sponsor of the Community Spirit Award, so we would get 2 tickets there. But if anybody wants to know, just let me know.
I won't need one. We'll be attending bar.
Oh, okay. Okay. The Elks are due in the bar.
Yeah, we were asked to attend the bar.
Okay, good. Land use bylaw review continues. I'm hoping it's not too far away that we will bring something to council. And we'll probably have to set up a couple sessions. I know I'm talking with Palliser in terms of timing. We may have to put it off to the new year, but once we get into November, we'll have some additional council meetings for budget and stuff. And so I wasn't sure, because the land use bylaw review will be a minimum of initially a half day to go through what's contemplated and what we're looking at changing. Tennis pickleball courts, as you know, they're done, and at least pickleball's been in use. So and they did submit a card. We have installed the water and sewer for the Kroll card project on 5th and 5th, so that's done. Yeah.
I think they're all sold now.
Oh, could be. I don't know.
I think so.
I know the two on that face the east were. So and I know generally they don't want to proceed until they have a good idea they're going to be able to sell.
I know the last one.
Okay, good. So yeah, water and sewer's in. So they tied in, I believe. So sidewalk replacement program. So now's the time when you may get some questions, what the process is. So as council's aware, you allocated $100,000 in the budget for sidewalk replacement. We had a study done that identifies, all of our sidewalks and the deficiencies and whether there are 3, which is worst, 2 and 1. So we've looked through that and we've done some visual looks, and we basically go out and we allocate up to $100,000. When they get here and people see them working, that's when they're like, oh, I need my sidewalk done. I need my sidewalk done. Yeah, this is the process. And some people will say, well, my sidewalk's not in good shape. And I'll say, well, it may not be in good shape, but there's sidewalks that are worse than yours, and we're trying to deal with them. So they're moving forward on that, and we'll probably be done here this week. So
Sorry, just a comment.
Yeah.
Anchor glass, I saw theirs was done.
Yeah.
That looks great. And
Yeah.
Is there something that they can put down to, I know that alkali is such an issue. Are they using a concrete that will work with that, or is there such a thing that it extends the life of?
I don't know if there's anything particular. I know we've been using Mudruck for a number of years, and they've been using our local concrete. I know we haven't had any issues, since I've been here in terms of, I know previous to me being here, I know there was some concerns with spalling and stuff that was happening quite frequently. We haven't had any issues with the stuff we put in and over the last 8 to 10 years. So
Thank you.
So tours, I have not been after GFL again. I know they're still in their busy time, and we will do that. But one thing that slipped in, and I actually had asked Garth if we could come to his water treatment plant after this meeting, because I knew we didn't have a big agenda. But he said they've got a water leak in front of their treatment plant that they would be working on right at this time. So I think that's an important tour. I know
Okay.
Councilor Bowden got it last time. Well, the councilor, last council got one. I know Garth and I had talked, and he had thought about setting one up for the entire board and all of the communities. But never got around to it. But I think it's important for those of you who haven't been in the water treatment plant to see what they do and how they do it, because water is an important service that is provided to our residents. So I'm working with Garth to find a time to do that, and it'll probably be a couple hours there. I think the one you went on, Councilor Bowden, we went out to the raw water reservoir. So it was a little bit longer, so I think that's it. Mr. Mayor, if there's any questions about that or anything else, do my best to answer them.
Did have one GFL complaint yesterday. I talked to Vicky about it and they shut down and proceeded to let down. Hanna Motor Products was very right.
Oh, okay,
And it was strange because at my shop, which is 100 feet away, there was no odor whatsoever. But just the right prevailing winds, and so I got a hold of Vicky, and they had shut down, and they were in the process of, they've got some odor suppressant that they spray on. They were in the process of doing that when I actually called. So,
okay. Okay. Any other questions? Lots going on out there, so, and I might have missed something, but if you have any questions, don't hesitate anytime, so. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Perfect, thank you.
And just, I guess, not in my report, but I think you all were aware we had a water break yesterday, so started out on 8th Ave. We noticed and called by one of the residents that there was some water on the street, not a ton, and so we weren't sure. There was a valve close by, so we thought maybe the bolts were leaking. So we started digging yesterday, and our crew got down to it. Found it was a hairline crack in the side of the pipe, the 4-inch main. So they went to put a high-max coupler on it, but our high-max coupler wasn't big enough because the crack was longer than that. So they had to shut the water off. So in the process of shutting the water off, the valve at the corner of 7th and 3rd popped. So then Brent called Brooks in because they had 2 of them going at the same time, and our guys did the one on 8. They cut out the section of pipe and placed a new pipe in and filled it up, and then Brooks helped with the one on the valve on 7th, and it was just the bolts had completely rotted off, and when they were putting the pressure on it to open it, they just popped. So we got it back on about 6 o'clock-ish, somewhere maybe just before 6. So, and go from there. So we did have the 300 block of 7th, the 400 block of 7th, the southern half of 8th Avenue, the 400 block, and then Mill Place. So, but it's,
But they worked fast and.
yeah, no, they went as quick as they could. So,
It's not -40, I'm sure the guys.
well,
are-
that was one of the bonuses that the weather was decent. So makes it much easier. So, okay, that's it, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Michelle, that would be victim services update.
Yes.
So I'll just start. So I know we had a bit of a discussion, I think last council meeting, and council had asked for a bit of an update on where the process was, what's going on. I know that there was also discussion at AM about it, and there was a resolution that was debated back and forth. Some communities, the majority of the communities that there voted that they wanted, basically my interpretation was they wanted to, no, they wanted reorg, they wanted well, status quo to where they were prior to the reorg.
Correct.
And then there was communities such as ours and Sylvan
Hill and
Lake
Sylvan Lake.
who don't have any victim services. And we're like, let's get this implemented. We can tweak it from there. Let's get something started. So Michelle's our resident expert on victim services. So I'm gonna turn it over to her and she can give you kind of the highlights of what the reorg looks like and where they're at and how they're planning to move forward. And she'll do her best to answer any questions you might have.
So yeah, I guess there's kind of two pieces to victim services for how it relates to us in Hanna. So there's the larger reorganization piece that you're hearing the announcements about and discussion about that's supposed to, move to that system over the next 18 months. Then for the 6 of us that have no services currently in the province, there's sort of an interim step that we have to go through there. So I'll just sort of run through a little bit of the history, what I know about the interim step, and then kind of into the broader program of what I can share. So we were previously served by Big Country Victim Services. They served the Drumheller, Hanna, and Oyen detachment areas when they were together. That organization folded. And so how it works is each of those VSUs are individually run boards. And so that one was done, the board folded. I think then there was some community outcry in those areas going, well, geez, that's a service we really need. We should really stand that back up and find a way to come back to the table and have victim services locally. When people started to inquire on how to do that, the province had already initiated the review process in 2019 on victim services. And while they were in the review process, there was no new funding contracts being granted for victim service units. So the existing units got extensions on their existing funding and nobody new could apply for funding. So where the problem became for Hanna and area was that we couldn't get into the process. So that's sort of where it sat when I started. And so started to hear, from community partners I work with here in Hanna about it. Started to hear from my FCSS colleagues in Drumheller and Oyen who are also dealing with it going, well, they keep saying the review's coming. We can't do anything till the review comes. When are we going to get the review results? And so during that time, some neighboring victim services, I know Heartland out of the Stettler area was doing some coverage for us, but had very limited capacity to do so because there was no additional funding for them, right? So they have the same funding that they've always had. Their residents want them to cover their area with that funding. So it was hard for them to agree to come spend money in other communities, which we can all understand why that would be a problem. So that's where I started kind of asking some questions about, well, what's going on with this report? Why is it still delayed? When might we know? What does this mean for us? And found myself invited into the process to kind of get to have sort of some of the early viewing of what the new program is going to be and to get to ask some questions and have some connections to ask, what about those of us that are in this quagmire of the 6 that don't have any coverage? So they were open in the Department of Justice and the Solicitor General to having those conversations about, okay, but great, you have a process that's coming 2 years down the road. That's a long time to ask residents to wait. And so they were open to us exploring some local options. And so there's sort of 2 schools of thought. So one thing we explored was, would they give us a one-off contract to set up something that wasn't truly a victim services unit, but could we house it out of an existing nonprofit organization in your community, have the same clearances and things? Could they find some way to fund something like that? So that started some discussions with the Learning Center as an easy nonprofit partner to identify that might have space to house staff if that was the case, and with their RCMP. Locally with Sergeant Wellsman. So we had those conversations of, okay, what could we all provide? What might that look like? What would the province need from us? The other stream the province was looking into simultaneously for us was, does it make sense to approach some existing victim service units to cover us if they could give them more money so that they would be able to? And so in the end, they decided to go that route, that it was easier to figure out for the 6 that are without services, that if they could do something similar for all of us, that would be easier for the ministry to go through getting an approval in place, have that consistency of the process. So that is where that piece is headed now. So they have sent out to existing victim services units saying that they have these 6, give us your proposal, give us your budget, and they're going to go through getting that approved and signed off. So the latest update I had yesterday from my contact there is that, summer's always hard to get proposals collected and things in from entities, right? Lots of boards aren't meeting, that sort of stuff. So here in the fall, they've kind of seen an uptick of expressions of interest from different volunteer boards. So in the case of Hanna and Oyen, they have us together with somebody who is interested. And so they expect by October 1st that they're going to have that practical proposal and budget received for us too. So I don't know what that means for the other 4, if they have one lined up for them as well, but ours is rolling along.
So Michelle, sorry to interrupt, but when you say 6, I thought it was 6 regions.
So Oyen's a region, Hanna's a region, Drum's a
Okay,
region.
okay, so
That's exactly where I was
So
going.
they're by,
I thought Drum, Hanna, Oyen was one region.
no, we're 3 of the 6.
Oh,
And
okay.
so how they classify the regions is RCMP detachment areas. So if that helps you
Okay.
think of it when you
No,
look at
and
the map.
that's cool, because we were talking attachments and then we were talking region on it.
Yes, so it's detachment zones or what they consider it when they divide up the map of what victim services looks like. So ours was a collective hybrid, and there are some others that exist, like how Big Country was, where it's more than one of the regions in there, but they are detachment areas. So if you know where the border is for our detachment area, that kind of gives you the lay of the land. So yes, for us in Oyen, it sounds like they have somewhere where we would be going together potentially for services. That would be the same entity that's looking to help both of us. So October 1st, they're expecting that in. They did say that their plan as of right now is to wait and have all 6 proposals ready to go to the ministry at once and ready for sign off and approval at once. I have done what I can do to ask if ours is ready October 1st. Could we ask for it October 1st? Whether we'll get any traction with that, I'm not sure. But I don't know the timeline. It didn't give an indication of how much farther behind the others might be in that process. So that's sort of what we're looking for, to get stood up as fast as we can get it stood up, so that when something happens and someone is a victim of crime, they have some support services in our area. So that's sort of that interim piece of what are we doing before we move to the new program. Does anybody have any questions directly in that area?
What area, who's gonna be?
They did not disclose to me who's putting in the proposal, so I would assume it's gonna be somebody neighboring, so it's gotta be someone either to the north or the south of us, I would presume, with us and Oyen going together. But just looking at logistics, right, for another board to think that they could take on having their caseworker and volunteer advocates come here, geography is going to be a big factor, so I
Will
would
they
assume
be
it's-
able to use, in the interim situation, would they be able to use some of our previous advocates, like as
So-
part of their system?
Yes, so there was discussion about trying to also help these 6 areas get, if we have previous advocates that are interested in returning, can we fast track getting all of their background checks and approvals and things in place? And Sergeant Welsman did say that some of that background check work is done at the detachment level locally. And so that, he could make sure that he had some resources available to help on our end if justice was open to that and kind of getting that piece in place. So yes, if my understanding was there would still be that possibility, which I think the board on their side would be agreeable to, because it's going to cut travel costs and make them more accessible if they have local advocates. And we have, in that process of when we were exploring, should we be our own local entity somehow, some of the previous advocates were kind of looped into that discussion of, hey, we're working on this, can we put your name on a list of somebody that might be interested in coming back? So we kind of done some of that legwork to have that list of people sort of compiled that we could hand off to this new board once they're in place. So yeah, that's sort of where that part sits. So then this leads us into the actual, what does victim services look like going forward? What did the review find? So in your guys' package, and I think I've sent the link to this before in just my regular council report, was the press release from the government. So there's a link where you can watch the video, but then they also had just the print piece here that kind of had the highlights of the program. So what I'm being told now for timeline on this rollout is on or before April 1st, 2024 is when this will be in place. There needs to be some glide path time for the transition and what they're looking to do. It's a fairly big structural move. And so respecting the boards and the employees and everything involved and making sure that it's a seamless transition, they've given themselves a fair bit of time to get to it. So you can see the highlights there on that enhancing support for victims of crime document. So it's some focus on the financial side, on some quicker access to emergency funding, increasing the time limit for applications, increasing some of the benefits that you can get for different sorts of things, some more court attendance reimbursements. So yeah, they kind of outlined what the changes are that way, and then the overall what's going to happen structurally. So there's the large municipalities and a few indigenous BSUs that will stay. I think there's 9 of them that are going to stay sort of how they currently operate, and the rest of the system is going to shift into 4 zones. And so those 4 zones, again, follow the RCMP zoning of how they divide up the province. So we would be South Zone. Essentially, we're on the north edge. So if you took to the north edge of our detachment and drew a line straight across the province, east to west, everything south that isn't a major municipality that's got a standalone would become part of our zone. So, and I can provide you guys with a map of what that looks like. It's just the RCMP zone map if anyone wants to take a look at what that means. And so what they're kind of looking at with those zones is that then there'd be 1 board. So currently there's 62 BSUs that would become 4. What they're thinking of that is that there's some savings to be had likely to the system to not be duplicating efforts everywhere along the way, and some consistency in funding and how the boards work and all of those things. So centralized in the fact that 1 large board, but they're still keeping caseworkers and advocates in communities. So it would not be a case of, oh, all of our people are in Chestermere and nobody anywhere else has anybody and you got to go there because that's where zone office is. They're still looking to have them co-located with detachments in the communities throughout the zone. So I think that's kind of one of the things that people have gotten a little bit in a panic about if they've only seen high level is 4 zones centralized. That sucks for rural Alberta, is I think where people's head goes when we hear that. So they, yeah, they're trying to have the best of both worlds, I'm going to say, in this sort of blended idea of a centralized board, but to have sort of that spread out network so that can serve people. And so what I have from Trent was some answers to some questions that come up about the centralized model. And I think that's probably the crux of what a lot of us are curious about. So I just sent him some questions about, will a centralized model remove services from our small communities? So that's a common thread. And so he comes back to say that we think it will actually increase services. And so here's some things to consider about that. The current state in small and rural communities and detachment areas is that the victim services grant goes to a small society or board made up of local community members. The majority of these boards will hire 1 or 2 full-time equivalents, and one of them is called the project manager. The board relies on the project manager to conduct all administrative duties and to make operational decisions. The project manager relies on the board for guidance and support. Administrative duties that they maybe have to cover include annual grant applications and reporting and all real-time financial management, operational deployment plans, including staffing of required detachment hours, recruiting, training, and scheduling volunteer advocates, direct response to calls for service with or without advocates, coordinating court support, community engagement and relationship building with external partners. And then the board might be responsible for the financial operation and accountability to JSG and HR responsibilities relating to their paid employees. So hiring, firing, replacement, performance management, etc., and retaining legal representation in the event of a lawsuit or wrongful dismissal. And so these local BSUs are also not integrated, so there's no mechanism by where any resources would be shared. So we ran into this talking about the Stettler one, right? There's no way for them to share with us in the current system. When they look at what they want in the future going forward with this new zone, is that the grant would go to the zone board that would be made up of member representatives from communities across the region. Each regional board would then hire a centralized professional support staffing group to provide professional services to the board itself, strategic leadership, supervision, coordination, financial, legal, cultural support to the frontline victim services caseworkers, formerly those project managers. So rather than the board relying on 1 person to conduct all of that admin work, the board would now have a larger group of paid professional staff. And the project manager roles wouldn't be relying on the board for guidance and support. They would have centralized governance.
$50 for the food bank.
And so they will have some of those other supports. The frontline caseworkers then would likely have more of their time focused on direct response to calls for service with or without advocates, direct deployments for court support, and community engagement piece. The regional board would be in charge of all the financial operations and accountability. And so that's sort of their overall vision for why this is good, is that if we can centralize some of those things like legal services, like grant reporting, all of those pieces, much more efficient, and your local caseworkers are actually going to have more time freed up to spend with victims and do the advocacy work.
So my question is, this group
Mhm.
will have, for lack of a better term, liaisons to Hanna, and so on and so forth. Does every community have the same say as far as how the board operates, or is it based on, for example, if it's in Chestermere, they have 6 people on the board of Chestermere?
So they haven't released that I've been privy to any direct, like, there will be this many seats for directors out there. It does say they want regional representation from across
no, I
the
heard
area.
that.
Yeah.
So what that looks like in practical application, I don't have the details
Okay.
on yet. I think the intention would be that it would be a diverse group that recognizes across the whole area. The pieces that they talked about that are really relevant to what we went through here is here, a couple of people were very passionate, ran the board, delivered the services, did a wonderful job for a number of years. And then things change and those people burn out or move on or come to some other opportunity and we lost it. Whereas in this case, if we had a local caseworker or a local board representative, it's a little bit more flow there, right? There's a mechanism to get somebody new in without losing the whole system. And that there's kind of some of that administrative work taken off of people's plates if you're in it for doing the victim advocacy work. It
Well,
would
as
be a
well, you
benefit.
have technically, if need be, you'd have support from lawyer or whoever.
Yes.
Fall under the same
Yes.
umbrella.
And they do talk about that from staffing standpoint of, yes, caseworkers would live at their home area and work from their home area. However, it does give flexibility in the system. Should there be a mass incident and we need to pull more caseworkers into an area to help support something, that's already there. You can just send the workers to help in that area. No problems of whose jurisdiction and whose money are we spending and all of those sorts of things. Same thing for holiday coverages, leave coverages, replacing employees. So if our spot's vacant, can somebody else be covering our area? So there's some logistics background that sound promising in how they're hoping to structure it. And then the other, I think, big question people had was, are you getting rid of the volunteer advocates? And no, they want to retain volunteer advocates. They don't want them to miss a shift. They just want to transition them into the new system and have them there. On the employee side, their intention is that they would like to hire lots of the existing employees. So the best pool of people that they can come to. There will be a process, and this is part of where the glide path to having this stood up is a little bit longer, of them to go through and say, okay, we need everybody in this zone to apply. There's so many positions we have. Where are we trying to station people? So there's some of that groundwork that will have to be done on the HR side of things that will just take some time. I think everyone can appreciate
And I
that.
think,
That's not overnight.
From what I gathered, even, and I'll use Stetler as an example, and I don't know for fact, from what I read in the paper, they have a very active victim services group and probably very well organized victim services group, and they have their project manager or their executive or whoever their staff is. There's some fear, trying to make sure that that staff person has a job moving forward, right? And how that person will be implemented into the new system, whether they'll just be a caseworker, whether they'll be.
Oh, no, and if you
HR
have something that
manager.
works and somebody's telling you how to
Yeah,
change.
yeah.
then-
Yes, it's easy for us to be excited because we have nothing at the moment. So for us, you can see the positives a little bit more clearly. I can understand the apprehension for some existing ones that it's working well and why wreck it. But yes, that's sort of their overarching where they're moving to. So there is going to be more stakeholder engagement and more rollout of details. I think some of those questions you're asking Danny about, how is the board makeup going to be? Some of those things will kind of get steps along the way. They'll have more things rolled out to people to look at and hear about. The other piece that Kim have just said was that at AM, there was some discussion about this and about what issues were kind of brought up about it. So I did read what they have on their website and took it back to my contacts at JSG. And so some of it that they still have online is not currently representative of the situation. So I had questions about in here that some of the money was going to go towards preventative programs and general revenues and things like that that come out of the victim services money. That is no longer the case. None of that fund is being used for that. Any of those sorts of programs are being funded out of general revenue and not out of the Victims of Crime Fund. So they just want to make that clarification that you may have seen outdated information. And so they just wanted to make sure it was clear that that's no longer the case. Yeah, so I think that's kind of the high level of what I know based on the information you guys have previously received and what I know from my side. Any more questions I can try to answer?
Well, it's just interesting, Michelle, because, you know, the Alberta municipalities is strength in members. And when the motion came forward, and Sylvan Lake had approached me about supporting the motion. And so of course I supported it. And it's interesting, we're supposed to be a unified body, and that's the point of Alberta municipalities, but there's still, I got a bone. I don't care if you have one or not. This is mine. And it's frustrating at times because, you know, if they were in that boat, I'm hoping that we wouldn't be the one not to share the boat. But talking to Sylvan Lake, to me, geographically, Red Deer would be logistically the place to go. And they actually are in consultation with Black Falls, which you drive through Red Deer to get to Black Falls from Silver Lake almost. So it was just interesting that it's frustration and interesting at the same time.
And that one might be a structural thing. I think Red Deer is one of the 9 majors that's run by the municipality rather than a standalone board. And so I'm wondering if that's just logistically, it makes sense to go to one that's a standalone board for how they're trying to set things up right now.
That makes sense, yeah.
The other comment too that I heard at AM too was that some of the previous services that were funded were not proposed to be funded. Again, I can't remember what they were. If it was just a tragedy or something, it wasn't necessarily part of
Court
the
services.
crime that the tragedy happened, that was not going to be included in victim
It's-
services.
it's
Is kind of
currently
where I
not.
understood. Yeah.
If you are a victim of a crime because you actually were witnessed of, so you see a crime happening and someone dies, you actually qualify for $5,000 in funding to help you with your therapy and da. But if you witness the car accident where there's horrific deaths, you get nothing because they were in a car. That's the rule. And
But it was an accident, it wasn't a crime.
right. But it could have been a crime if you saw the person, which has happened actually a couple times this year in the US, where they just drove through people according to the regulations, because I had to go through them line by line when a family member was a victim of a crime that you didn't qualify at all. So I think they're clarifying some of those vehicle accident related. And of course, suicide was a funny one. I think they're clarifying that. So if you're victimized by witnessing the person's loss of life, it counts, even though it's not a crime.
Well, that'll be good having it regionalized so that there's no interpretation at a
Right.
local level.
That's also been an issue, yeah. So I'm excited by that. My curiosity is all the money that had been collected in this area had a really good cushion. 30% of every ticket, lots of lead pedals in our area. And then they started using it for other areas. So they're saying, okay, we'll stop. Is there anything left? Are we
So-
starting from scratch?
So my understanding with the money side, because this was a question of where did big country's money go? Is there
Yes, where
anything in
did
a
it go?
pool somewhere?
Yeah.
And so what I've been told by JSG is that they can only take back grant money. So essentially in the year you folded, your unspent grant money would go back to them. So they recouped that. They don't take back any money that was community raised from them. So that would be a question for the former board of whether there was proceeds in the bank account that didn't go to offset debts or final pay or any of those other things. And no one seems to have an answer or have a pile of assets sitting somewhere. So and it would be kind of a moot point as we move forward into the zonal approach, because it's going to be a funding for the zone. It's going to be multi-year funding agreements. It's not going to be individual grants and bank accounts. So while people have had questions about that, I don't know that it's a rabbit hole worth chasing. I think we just get on the new funding piece and it's going to be we're going to be a part of that zone and we're going to get our allocation that way.
More consistent.
Sorry. I guess that was one of my questions. I had seen where Victim Services was doing some fundraising. And so if they do locally, it will go to the main pot and be distributed.
So that will be a question, I think, in the board structures going forward of if fundraising will be necessary or wanted and how that would be managed as far as, is it for all of South Zone if you do a fundraiser, or can it be determined to be for Hanna detachment area? I don't think they've gotten into the fine details, or they haven't shared at least the fine details of what that would look like on that side. They are talking multi-year funding agreements for them though, which is great. Because that was one of the stumbling points that was hard for the current BSUs was the annual grant process and the reporting and you get one finished, but you've already started on the next one, kind of constant churn there. And how do you budget when you're on a one-year agreement is always a hard thing. So they're moving to a multi-year with these larger zones, which should give some stability for people to know, as politics change, that you already know what money you're agreed to get and those things for the next few years, that it's not chaos.
Yeah, I do know Big Country, when they were in existence, did do fundraising, and I always questioned why they would have to do fundraising when they're providing a service to the province, but they did do that, and I don't know what the breakdown was, whether they had that in, in their, I honestly don't know what happened when they disbanded, if there was money in their account, how it was dealt with. If the grant dollars, they can go back, but if they did have fundraising proceeds in their account, what happened to it and where is it at? So,
and they did have to be registered societies the way it works with the current BSUs. They would all individually have status. So in theory, that's all been filed with their society stuff as they disbanded. So in theory, it's public information we could ask for and probably get of what happened on that end. Going forward, that's another piece is now it's 4 society registrations, not 62 society registrations and renewals and things to do. So that's kind of some of the additional savings on admin work that they're looking for there.
So can we find out how much money maybe you have? Because if it's sitting out there,
Yeah.
we should be able to get it back for our.
Because I think when you set up your society, you have to make a plan, if you should fold, where will the money go?
Yeah, it's supposed to.
Whether you're going to donate it to another nonprofit or whether it goes, where it
Yeah.
goes, period. And so that might be in their society papers or something.
I'm guessing we can probably find out where it went. I'm not hopeful that there's any
There's no
magic
magic
pot to go pick up. Yes,
Oh,
that I think it's
oh.
for information purposes. It's not going to be functionally relevant to us, but I can certainly ask if we can find out on the society to decide what the process would be to get that information.
Because if they folded, there's no way doing the annual return.
No, but there would be some indication of where it had gone.
Yeah, there'd be the final return, right? It would be on file that might tell you a little bit of the information, but if they disbanded, it had to go somewhere. And the province has assured me they did not take any locally fundraised dollars back. They don't have a mechanism to do so. They only took back the grant dollars that weren't spent.
Thank you.
Anything else? Thanks, Michelle.
You're welcome.
Yeah, very detailed.
Poor girl just sitting on a bug when you were sworn to secrecy and she had a non-disclosure, she had to sign and.
With justice and the solicitor general,
Yeah,
as you know, it's
not
just a
people
little.
Not people you want to bug her up, right? So-
Yes, I had lots of emails yesterday. Just to be clear, I'm allowed to say all the things that you were emailing me today.
Yeah,
to
verify,
verify.
allowed to talk.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's been an interesting process, but great to kind of have that inside bit to see things and be able to ask questions from the rural perspective. I know we
Yeah.
often find that that's missing at a table sometimes.
Well, when
being
you
outside
talk
the major
regional
centers.
board, that's my flares go off in my head going, okay, great, it's in Chestermere, it's in wherever. And as we've seen with our hospital and many other things, as soon as it becomes regional, the outlying areas are, they're there, but they're not part of the decision-making process.
but I think even from what I recall from victim services, our Big Country, we had a bit of that even in our region because
for sure.
Drumheller was where
The
they
big
based
center.
out of, and they, and again, this is the bias that I
Larger
hear
population.
from our group is that, well, everything's done and everything's in Drumheller, everything's done out of Drumheller. Drumheller's getting the bigger benefit than us, but I do know Wayne provided, I think, some significant fundraising dollars because I think the thrift shop in Oyen they were managers of it or heavily involved in the thrift store in Oyen, so.
And with that, I will say from a rural lens, when they were discussing sort of, how they decided on 4 zones, how they decided sort of what funding model that's going to be, how many caseworkers that's going to be, all of the things that they're looking into that. It was not just per capita. There was, I think, 19 data points that they were using it within that of things like distance to major centers and some of those other pieces that we always say, have you thought about? Because it's great to say, oh, there's only so many people in the town of Hanna or in the special areas. So you qualify for 0.1 of a person, but looking at some of those outside factors of how,
Geographic.
yeah, well, how does this actually look and how do you get to services? So I will say they have done the legwork to take into account some of those extra factors. Nothing will ever be perfect and every community can't have all of the things, but it was good to see that there was some of that considered and it wasn't just the, okay, do you have a population over X or sorry, bye-bye. So it was good to see that background being done.
I'm sorry, can I ask one more question? So if they're in a region that say they find that there is an increase in, say, suicide for farmers, is there an opportunity for that group to put in a request for some sort of something to be able to deal with that situation as far as education or additional outside support outside of victim services if it's not deemed as, but to try to like more of a preventative type thing, it would be my.
So yeah, my understanding is that the boards will be focused on their victim services mandate, but part of what they're going to want the caseworkers doing is that community engagement piece. And so that's where I think we'll see them at our interagency tables.
Yeah.
And some of those places where then it comes into your rural mental health, or comes into, some of the other initiatives through FCSS, through whoever, to kind of have those conversations and look at, okay, victim services can say, we're seeing a trend in this, and we can say, okay, who else has resources for on the prevention side, to do those sorts of things. So it wouldn't be within their mandate, but I think they'd be a voice at the table talking about those concerns and trying to work together.
To the numbers and then be able to somehow
Well,
try to address.
yeah, and I think the learning center, if we had a spike in something, would probably be our best liaison to source support.
Yes, as far as if we want to bring in a certain speaker or, and yeah, our rural mental health group for special areas does a good job of that, where we're all kind of at that table and can say, okay, we've got funding dollars, which is always helpful, and access to some great speakers and trainings and things that can come in.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michelle.
You're welcome.
It's nice to have some good news once in a while.
I try. I was happy.
Optimistic news. How does that sound? There we go.
I was happy when they said they're, moved to the point where they have a group in mind that wants to potentially take us on, right? That's a huge step to
Taken for now.
yes, it's something concrete where we are moving towards a budget is coming in and that piece is moving forward. So I will keep Kim apprised as I hear more if we know when and who and how that's going to look going forward. And I'm sure we will get it to you guys as we have that information for rollout and be public about the fact that we have something stood back up once it's in place.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cool. On to 6.02 land development discussion.
So just want to be very clear with council, there's no imminent plans of any land swap or sale or purchase or buy. It's just Mark, Nakota, and Cam and I met a month or two ago just to talk about land that Prairie Land owns, land that the town owns, and in anticipation of maybe some future development down the road. So administratively, we've looked at the former Hanna Primary School lands as a good infill development opportunity, especially the east half of that property. Services are already in place, in the streets, so it's not, you're not having to bring them from somewhere to get them there. But there hasn't been a demand for or a need for residential development. The town had just completed their single family home development in Fielding Place, and we know we haven't had any uptake on any lots until recently there. So it was always in the back of our minds, well, that might be an area where you could expand to. In discussion, and I know in discussion with Mr. Kroll, and I'm waiting for him. I'm hoping we'll have something at the October meeting to talk about land swap from his development to Fielding Place. The thought was Mr. Kroll, Mr. Carg's ideas around 55 plus duplexes have seemed to be successful recently. And would that be maybe an area for that to happen? If that was an area for that to happen, the school owns the land, we'd have to, enter into some discussions with them whether, and I think they would probably prefer to sell it to the town or swap with the town versus with a private developer. But the school is also, if you've read through some of our stuff, the school is also, and again, very preliminary, would like to, in a perfect world, establish a dormitory to bring in outside students to the community to utilize our school. And I know that they look at the former ATCO camp lands as a great location to do that. So we've basically just had a preliminary talk in regards to if these things fell into fruition, would you guys be willing to entertain looking at it more seriously, or is it a no-go? I think from our perspective, we would be interested in exploring it. My concern with the ATCO camp that I expressed to Cam and Mark was it would be easy for us to say, okay, we're going to swap and give you the dormitory, these 3 acres in this corner or in this location, the ATCO camp to do it. But without a concept plan for the entire property, it gets really hard when you're doing one-off. So you go to service this piece, so they're good to go. And then somebody comes down the road and says, well, I want to put in this. And, you got to run the water lines here and there. And so, one-offs and piecing things out makes things more challenging. It's not that it can't be done, but so I just wanted to, two things, let you know, and especially for new council who may not be aware, the Prairie Land owns that land that the Hanna Primary School sat on. We have been very adamant with Prairie Land, no matter what they would do with that land, the west half of that property from the town's perspective needs to remain playground and park space, green space, because we don't have a ton on our east side, so we want to make sure that that's available. We entered into an agreement with Prairie Land when the primary school came down. So the town does manage the turf. So we cut the grass, weed whip in the fence and spray. We do the snow removal on the sidewalks. But Prairie Land is responsible for the playground, maintenance, repairs, insurance, as well as I know they've been spending some dollars taking some of the dying poplars out. That's been on Prairie Land's dime. So we've operated that way. Time flies. I don't know how long the school's been down, 5 years, 6 years.
I was gonna say 5 or 6, so I'm guessing probably 10 because everything I said.
Not 10, because the primary school was here when I came back here in 2013. So, but probably 5 or 6 years, the school has been gone. So just wanted to let you know that the Prairie Land owns that land. B, we have an agreement on the maintenance with them, and C, that we're, have had some preliminary discussions about if there was a demand for residential properties, the town might be interested in that land. And they have indicated they have an interest in the land at the ATCO camp area. Again, very preliminary, but I know one of their goals or wish lists would be to have aspirations is a good word, would be to have a dormitory, close to the school, so.
Also,
So would that be, if it goes forward, would that be based on assessed value of the properties? Like with, just given that the school doesn't pay taxes on any properties. If there is a swap and there's infrastructure already on the campsite, will that be taken into consideration on the value? Yeah, that's what I'm just.
Yeah,
as far as
we
when
haven't
look
got
at
into,
value
the
then.
details by any means. And it's a bit of a, it's a bit of a misnomer that the Atco camp land is serviced.
that's exactly what I was gonna.
There is a lift station in one location on the site, so if anything developed there, all of the infrastructure would have to be put in to direct that to the lift station. And there is water to a central point in that camp that would then feed the rest of the development. But so it's not a ton of difference from what's at the primary school. There is water mains there, sewer mains adjacent to the property. So I think it's, as far as servicing, I think they're probably in a fairly similar position.
If that does go forward. And say the east side is developed. Would the school still look after the playground area and park area, or would that come to the?
It
town?
would be how we would want to purchase that land. If they wanted to swap and the town said, well, we'll take the whole block
And then exchange that.
in
for
exchange
equal
for
amount
what
for the
equal amount there, and then we would then become responsible for
playground.
the playground.
Well, we have to realize it's just a very preliminary.
Oh, definitely.
stage. There's
Oh,
no,
yeah, no, I
there's no
realize that.
negotiations
No,
happening, there's
no.
no.
Yeah, no, I realize that, but those are just some.
And Cam
questions
was
that
gonna
come up.
have this discussion with his board, just very preliminary, saying, just to keep you in the loop and their board members in the loop, that administratively, we've had some discussions about what might happen or could happen down the road.
Well, it makes sense. The location is ideal for the school, so it does make sense.
Yeah, and I do, again, lots of things would have to happen to bring this to fruition, let alone, we'd have to agree on what type of purchase, what type of swap.
Yeah.
The land would have to be rezoned,
Mhm.
because it's probably urban service now, because it was a school on it. So if you were gonna put residential homes on it,
There's so many
it
whereas.
has to be rezoned. And again, you'd have to engage into a public process with our residents there, to involve them, because at the end of the day, it's a little bit of NIMBY. Some people might say, I don't want any houses there. I like having this green space right across from me. I don't want any development there. It might make perfect logical sense to have some development there. We've talked about that location very preliminary too, as maybe it would be a good off-leash dog park. But again, you'd have to have that discussion with the residents to see what
My
their
fishing
thoughts
pole.
are. You could dig a hole and put some fish in there, yeah? So I just wanted to let you know, we're having very preliminary, we've had one discussion about it, and just to see if there was any questions or concerns or anything as we move forward. It is certainly a long ways away from coming to fruition, and would involve many steps, and would involve significant conversations with council. So I just wanted to let you know
Great
where it's
discussion.
at, so.
Mhm, mhm.
Thank you.
Okay, any more questions on the future?
Future, yeah.
I have quotations up,
Yeah,
future.
yeah.
Residential development. Hearing none, on to the round table. Councilor Kroll, nothing going on, nothing
So you've
exciting.
got your waste commission all sorted out now, the next meeting?
Yeah, and I'm going to go to the food bank this afternoon, that's about it.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Council Bowden?
I don't think I have anything. I enjoyed the discussion at Alberta municipalities and, did get a chance to meet some other people as well, and I think it was a good session. So I don't have anything else to offer.
Council Murphy?
I'm glad to be back. My apologies for, I ended up with a lung infection, so I was down for the count, but I'm feeling much better and no longer contagious, so we're good to go. And this weekend, I'm a marriage commissioner and I'm marrying my son and his girlfriend in Banff. So I'm looking forward
This
to.
your first, this is the first.
Yes,
time you will
it'll be
marry
the first
anybody.
and probably the
Last.
only, yeah, but it'll
It's
be.
actually a really neat thing that they've done, allowing people to do that, like Cheyenne and Kyle were married by Cheyenne's grandpa.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of interesting, the process, and it's really cool, because I mean, that's, as you said, once in a lifetime kind of thing.
But you got rules.
Oh,
And I know
yes.
Grandpa was struggling with the rules.
Oh, yes. Well, we're still not 100% sure that the marriage is actually consummated.
Consummated,
Consummated, yes, confirmed.
I'm sure they're consummated.
Yeah, confirmed.
Kyle
That's
appreciates,
actually in the-
Kyle appreciates this conversation.
The paperwork actually says you have 48 hours to hand
Yeah,
in,
we're not sure that.
Right. and then you have to go to court and validate it if that doesn't happen.
Mr. Farrell. Dr. Farrell.
Well, I'm recuperating from all this walking.
Yeah,
Sorry,
no
sorry,
kidding.
Counselor Earl, but
Oh, no, it was all right. It was, need new shoes, that's all. But no, it was entertaining and, learned a lot and, run into a lot of school board trustees that have become counselors,
Yeah,
from all over the province. I said, gee, I thought it was an old homecoming again from,
Nice.
that's nice.
and stuff. So, no, it's a learning experience and,
That said, I believe all of these sessions are available online, correct?
that's my assumption. I
Yeah,
haven't went. and
That's,
looked.
I haven't either. I did two, I did the social media one, which was, interesting, informative. And then I did and I don't remember the exact terminology, Laughing Matters, I believe is what it was called. And, there was some really good advice in the Laughing Matters. To the effect that you have to realize that laughing is very important. It's a part of healing, it's a part of everything. So, when you're getting beat up about, and I'm gonna throw it out, GFL or whatever, realize that, you're doing the best you can, and at a point in time, you have to just be able to take a deep breath and smile or laugh about it. There was some interesting, they had, what's his name now? Peter Brown. And the mayor of Airdrie is also Peter Brown. So we had quite an interesting discussion to start it off. Peter Brown introduced Peter Brown. So, but there was some really interesting things. The one that sticks out for me, because I'm a hockey guy, the CBC used to do a television show called The Irrelevant Show. And so they had Jason Smith of the Oilers, Andrew Ferentz of the Oilers, do a presentation. You know how when a hockey player gets a puck and the whole crowd hollers, shoot.
Yeah.
And so he basically did a skit and gets in front of the net and I don't know what I should do with the puck. Oh, yes, shoot. That's what I have to do with the puck. I have to shoot. But by the way, folks, you just told everyone in the arena, including our opposition, that I have to shoot the puck. I really appreciate this, but we have to come up with a different system. And it was actually, it was good to look at. Like I said, I've actually Googled and YouTube a couple of the irrelevant shows, and there's some good humor on there. So remember, when you're down in doom and gloom, find something humorous, share it. It's important. There was one about, one of the ones they showed us was a training video with a monkey. Basically had two monkeys in a cage. And so they rewarded the monkey for handing them a rock. And on one side, they handed them a cucumber. On the other side, they handed them a grape. Well, the monkey that they had got the rock from first, handled the cucumber. He ate the cucumber. He was very, very happy, super happy. Second monkey hands the rock and they give him a grape. Well, the monkey that got the cucumber the second time around gets his cucumber and he looks at it and he throws it at the presenter because he got a grape, I want a grape. And so by the time they did this about 3 times, and this monkey was pretty entertaining, got almost violent with this presenter about not getting his grape. So like I said, just remember, keep it all in check and remember to smile and giggle about things. And you know, it's hard. The jobs we do are, we don't look to make popular decisions. People don't ever come and tell you did a good job other than Jay Slept, which I really appreciate. You don't get that. You know, you get the negative side of things. And remember, if you come across something funny, just share it with the rest of us. And you know, just keep the humor up. I mean, keep it real. It's hard. So that was the session I kind of took, and I kind of shook my head about thinking, what could this possibly have to do with Alberta Munis? But having gone through it, listened to the presenters, it was good.
And I think I thought I heard that one was a full house.
It was. There was standing room only. Same thing with the social media one. The first session that I went to, it was full. But yeah, just for laughs, I know laughing matter, I should say, if you get a chance to watch it on the Muni site, it's worth a view. It just kind of brought everything back into perspective. And so many of those sessions are doom and gloom and you know, structure, and we have to do this, and we have to do that. To have something that was a little off the map was refreshing, I felt. So other than that,
I'm
Councilor Bowe,
sorry, I'm sorry, can I add
Yeah.
just one more? I think just for anybody that might be listening, that council did ask Mr. Neal to find a hotel that was cheaper than the ones that were right on site. So we were able to enjoy a 20-minute walk both ways
some of us
to
were,
our
Yeah.
session, and it
half
saved,
hour.
and it did save a fair amount of money. So if anybody is concerned about that, I just wanted to
Yeah.
mention that was conscious for all of us. And
Yeah, yeah. if
and I did
anybody's-
enjoy the 20-minute walk for, like, I'm sorry.
Well, it was
Oh,
fun because we got to.
We got to visit. and
BS and all that.
before
We
and
got lost a
after.
little bit.
Got lost a lot.
Yes, a lot.
So that I just wanted to share and thank you,
Yeah.
my traveling partners.
Yeah. The
Mr.
blind guy did okay. We got in out of the city okay. So.
Yeah, we got our.
Yeah.
You're here in one piece. That's a
Yeah.
good
Yeah.
sign.
My wife says, how do you know nobody figure wagged yet?
Oh,
Fair enough. I said,
We didn't see it.
yeah, we.
yeah.
So I
thank you so
do,
much.
I just one other thing as we are wrapping up. So I know the mayor's reached out to you in terms of our org meeting is our next council meetings. So I'll be pestering the mayor next week to say, okay, where are we going? What are we doing? So if you haven't had the discussion with the mayor in terms of what you're looking for, where it's at, please do, because we'll be appointing at the next meeting for the next year, so. I just didn't want you to forget that, and if you didn't say, oh, I didn't get a chance to tell the mayor that, so.
The only concern I had, Mr. Neal, is that the list did not include the expectation of the original appointment. They're not all 1 year, are they? I thought
Yes.
some of the
No,
committee.
they're all 1 year, yeah. Council has to hold an organizational meeting annually.
Yes, so every appointment that I'm on,
As a
currently,
Yes,
I can
as a
walk
counselor.
away. Yeah, I'm talking about-
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what I do here.
Yeah,
I'm a counselor,
yeah, so it's, yeah,
Some of
they're
them
all
have 3-year
appointments
terms
are 1
on
year.
boards.
yeah. But not as a counselor.
Right.
Okay.
Cool. Adjourn.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay.